I've been learning Unity, and I thought I'd make a line of sight visualization because 3D terrain is pretty handy for recognizing or for showing the kind of layout of the field, but it makes line of sight a little strange because the line of sight isn't exactly geometric. Let's put this guy up here to kind of show you what I mean. So here, you can kind of see how it, let's say it has kind of like a height to it from this vantage point, and it kind of stays at an elevation, and then it drops down at the hex right before the lower elevation. And that creates some interesting scenarios. For example, there is lots of trees in between targets, and one of them is elevated. A lot of times, and this may not be clear to new players, the line of sight will go directly over those trees unless, of course, the woods are right next to the target or the attacker, I suppose. Another place things get a little bit confusing is with really high elevations. So let's make some of those. So here we have this giant hill. Maybe you're playing on one of those mountain maps. And the attacker maybe is way on top. You can see him there, kind of. You can kind of see him way up there. And you would expect this to be clipped as the target gets closer. And it only gets clipped when the target is adjacent to the hill. And that's, of course, your level 2 or more dead zone. But visually, a player may expect it to kind of, or the line of sight to kind of pass through this hill and be clipped much further away. But of course, that is not the case. And in fact, we might even expect a lot of these woods to be clipped from one player to another. And of course, that's not the case. Line of sight just goes right over those because the line of sight in Battletech is, for the most part, the highest vantage point between two unless it's adjacent. So here we get that really big drop. And so one thing I like about this visualization is it kind of makes those kind of sets of rules a little bit more clear, and this idea that it just kind of goes, it kind of just cruises along at whatever's higher until it drops down at the last minute. Another fun thing with this guy is alternate paths. So if a line of sight goes down, I guess, the spine of the grid, it's the target's choice which side of that line of sight goes through. I think, and then there was a ruling a long time ago that it was quote unquote defender's choice, and defender was whoever lost initiative, but I think that's been adjusted in the latest battle mech manual to be specific to the target, or to say it's the target that gets to choose. There's a couple of other fun cases. Of course, there's water line of sight. If we have this attacker here, and hopefully this is apparent, as you move him around, it kind of colors where the attacker can see or the kind of penalties involved. And if we pull him or her into this lake, whoop, everything goes dark because the attacker is submerged. So line of sight anywhere out of there is going to be blocked. But if we drop, actually, let's make a little bit more water out here. If we drop, if we drop the target down here too, everything's just fine. Of course, maybe we can put some hills underwater and you can kind of, there we go. So if we move the attacker around, you can see that it's just the submerged areas minus those spaces occluded by the hill. Another thing that's a little peculiar about line of sight in Battletech, especially for newer players, is the idea of partial cover, and that the target has to be adjacent to the hill. So even if we have a straight shot here, we have like a level 1 in the way, that level 1 doesn't get clipped until the target is adjacent to it. Now, I think this visualization may be a little bit better if we could kind of maybe indicate that there's the potential for partial cover here. I just haven't addressed that visual challenge yet. But hopefully by playing around, you can kind of get a sense where it's clear and where it's not. Alternatively, let's make a couple hills out here. If you are touching the attacker or have him selected, you can kind of see places where there will be potentially partial cover. This guy that's sunken down, I think is probably, yeah, it's water. So actually that's another interesting thing here. So if we touch the attacker here, you can kind of see that all these water hexes will grant partial cover to anything that's in there. All right, I think that's about it. This guy's been pretty fun to play with, and I might do a little bit more with him. One thing that's been a little bit of a bummer is it's been kind of tricky getting transition to an orthographic view. So this is top down, but it's not quite 2D, so to say. So you'll get a little bit of stretching on the sides, and so it's not like printable or anything like that. So I might poke at that a little bit more. There's a lot of other tiny visual things to do. But if you're interested, leave a comment. I might release this in toward the end of the month or something with some changes. But hope you found it interesting.